The world of story has captivated humanity since the dawn of time. The oldest known form of communication, verbal storytelling is responsible for the continuity and development of civilization from its most primitive moments to its most advanced. Story involves a sense of mystical wonder, but is also a powerful medium for communicating real and concrete ideas that shape people's lives and make them take action. Steve Schramm, marketer, nonfiction writer, and story nerd, and Alex Giguere, fiction writer, wannabe game designer, and story nerd, join forces as worlds collide to discuss how story is the most powerful concept ever known and how it interacts with each and every aspect of our lives, from the most magical to the most mundane. Well, hey there, welcome into another episode of the Story World podcast. Steve Schramm here, my boy Al. What's up, man?
Oh, just enjoying this fine evening. We've already had a banter for about an hour or so. So I think we're all warmed up and ready to go.
Yeah, we are. We were just talking about how we need to start recording that because I think that's arguably more interesting than the actual podcast content.
It probably
So,
is probably much more confusing and shows a lot more about us than maybe we care to show
mm,
ourselves. So
yeah, 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 this is probably true. All right. Well, we're talking in this episode about can stories ever be too big? And I thought maybe I would just take a second to sort of set up I came up with this topic, so I'll kind of set up why.
well,
Um,
before you get into that, this is also
yeah,
our last episode for a
that's
while.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Steve and I we're gonna go through the whole year. And we kind of almost made it, but this is our 41st episode. And after tonight, we're just done forever. Calling it
Mm,
quits.
yeah.
No, we'll
Nah,
come back. So we're
can't do that.
actually with a new baby coming for me, and then just with the end of the year and Thanksgiving, Christmas, and I think just having to do this, we do this every week and it's fun, but we're just gonna take a little bit of time off and start fresh with the new year. So this is gonna be our last one for a little bit and take a little
Yep.
breather and come back stronger and better than ever.
Yep, that's right. I mean, it's ultimately only going to be a few weeks off.
Yeah.
We'll publish this week, and then so just shy of a couple months off, and we will still be publishing on the Substack. Correct? You still plan to write one next month, right?
Yeah. So Steve can talk a little bit more than I can, simply just because he's more familiar with the platform. But yeah, Steve and I have the Story World Substack now, and actually we've both written kind of introduction posts, but then I kind of made my first official post about the fantastic world in the real world, which Steve says is a good read. So maybe it
It
is,
is.
maybe it isn't. And Steve will be
It
coming out
is.
with one next week. And so I think that we're going to kind of have a couple jam sessions over the next couple months and hopefully just have some better content and a little bit different ideas to output starting fresh in the new year and then keep growing
Mhm.
from there. So really exciting stuff.
Yeah, just to banter for just a minute about it. I think as I look back at the podcast that we recorded, I think we've covered not all, but we've covered a lot. We've done sort of like the movie reviews, and those are cool, but we've done a lot of sort of, as far as ideas go, we've done a lot of high level things. And I kind of predict that next season will be a lot more about specific things. For example, issues that Alex is facing as he's working through writing his fiction book, right? Or maybe even just tossing back and forth on one of the ideas that we bring up in the Substack, like laser focusing in on that topic for the podcast. And honestly, trying to keep them. I know we say this a lot, but honest to goodness, trying to keep the content of the podcast to the first 20 to 25 minutes, and then story of the week after that, and then close it down from there, just to keep it more listenable, more engaging, again, laser focused rather than rambling. Alex is not a rambler, but I am. And so we got to kind of get that under control.
And I
So
know
I think
that
it's a good
and
plan.
I know that Steve has probably said that every episode this year, and half hour later, everyone's wondering why Steve is still going on. But I think with this plan, I actually think that think we're gonna stick to it. I think it's gonna work really well. Kind of, I'm basically just reiterating what Steve said, but yeah, really focus on specific points, whether it's from one of the newsletters that we wrote or something we talked vaccine, and just really dig in deep to it and hit it hard. Go 20-25 minutes, and then after that, it'll probably be more bantering. We'll talk about story of the week, whatever other thoughts, and then hopefully we'll have some more extra bonus content and other material that we'll put out, whether it's on Substack or on this. And so I think that it's going to be one, a lot more even fun next year, but then two, a lot more in depth as well. So I think it's going to be a little bit of everything. And
Yeah.
just an additional bonus, kind of bringing everyone in into maybe Steve's and I writing and work process, and kind of, welcoming you in, and being, not necessarily being a part of it and making decisions, but being a part of it and kind of understanding our workflow, and just kind of seeing the challenges that maybe we hit while we're working through things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's cool. I think there's a really bright future, so I'm excited
Absolutely.
about it.
All right. So sorry, continue on with this episode. My man Schramm.
Yeah, yeah, so I am a very motivated individual. I consider myself to be a high achiever, which is a pretty far cry from what I was even back in, like, 2015, right?
I've
So
heard the
the this
stories.
yeah, this it's pretty crazy stuff, pretty wild. I used to, anyway, used to sit around in my in if it on a good day when I was working, I was sitting around in my underwear taking calls for, the proflowers.com or whatever it was, Proflowers and Sherry's Berries, and operating a call center. That's
Excellent.
as good as it ever got, okay? Beyond that, I didn't do much, but then I started reading, and, I've talked about those stories before. So so now, right, I've spent the last 7 years, building a business, the first 5 of those part-time while working full-time, and then the last 2, by the grace of God, have been full-time in the business, and I've been supporting my family and working from there. And, uh, I live in this tension between the way I've been calling it, just because it's really easy for everybody to understand, is I live in this tension between trying to be basically like Elon Musk versus a coal miner, right, for West Virginia, right? Elon Musk being the save the planet, you know, the future of humanity, live on battery power, go to Mars, the
All the
just
coolest
yeah,
fun stuff.
yeah, there's a world to save, and by golly, I'm gonna save it and change it with my business. And then on the other hand, uh, slowing down, being content, realizing where my blessings come from, realize that if you look at frankly, my numbers, my revenue, not only that, but just like how blessed we are, even materially, and not even materially, or not just materially, but also family wise, etc. I'm a very blessed individual, and I should be content on a daily basis. And I think it's legitimately a very good thing to just simply be content with where you are. So I've been thinking a lot lately about this idea of, well, what does it look like to be motivated to save the world on some days, but then on other days realizing that you're happy with where you're at, you feel blessed just to be at this point in life. And yeah, and as with anything else, again, we're titling the episode "Can Stories Ever Be Too Big?" And and I think actually there might even, I want to look it up here. There might even be some additional nuance to that. Yeah,
How come
can
that
you?
was from
I
a
wrote
high
down.
level topic?
Yeah, right.
Really,
Well,
yeah, it's so big and important.
yeah. I mean, can your stories and your ideas ever be too big? Is sort of the way that I framed it, and there might even be some tie-in. And in fact, I think there really is to Alex's side. So anyway, I just wanted to set the topic up. That's kind of where I'm coming from with that piece of it.
Yeah, I think it's funny. We're kind of used to now. We've been doing this now for 40 episodes, where right away the topic, I'm already looking at it from C's perspective, then my fictional writing perspective, and then how it all relates to real life as well. That's kind of our three prongs to success there.
That's right.
Looking, and so from the perspective of life itself, one thing Steve and I were actually talking about this a few weeks ago, or maybe a few months ago now, but just the realization that uh, whether whether you are a Christian or not a Christian, that these are finite bodies and you have a finite life that you live. And so, honestly, like when looking at real life, yeah, there are some stories that are too big to do. Um, you cannot you cannot pick up all your bags and move away and save the world somewhere while also being fully invested over here if you have a family. There are priorities, and there are just some stories that you might have to shelve, some stories that are too big to tackle, and some stories that are perfect that you should, take on and enjoy. So as far as real life, there's obviously a lot of applications to that. Then, of course, thinking about the fictional side of things, have a lot of thoughts on that too. But as far as, actually getting into, is a fiction story, can you write a story that's too long, or is that not possible?
Yeah.
And so a little bit less serious tone there.
Well, there's trade-offs, right? It's
Yeah.
like I was listening, or rather I was watching on YouTube a recent interview, um, in the UK that Elon was just on, and we seem to talk about Elon a lot, but, like, why not? I mean, he's pretty
Part of the
in
world.
the
Yeah, he's the world.
big piece of the world right now, yeah, for sure. And he was talking about how his 70 to 80-hour work weeks, uh, post-acquisition of Twitter are now, for a season, 120-hour work weeks, okay? Now, an 80-hour work week is still more than double my
All right.
typical work week, right? And a 120-hour work week, I don't think I knew that there were that many hours in a week, right? So it's really even hard to, frankly, to imagine what that looks like, but I think the point stands that it's for a season, right? There are trade-offs that you have to make. You know, it turns out if you acquire a $44 billion investment that is losing money and you knew it was losing money from even before you started the negotiations for the deal, turns out that requires a lot of work.
It's a
Um,
good thing he doesn't have any like side businesses that he has going on in the
oh,
you know.
that would be awful if he wasn't trying to go to Mars and battery power Earth at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so it is. I think there is. I've just been thinking about this. Can your stories, can your ideas, can they be too big? Obviously, you have trade offs. You can't save the world and take care of your family um, at the exact same time. I mean, obviously, my wife and my family have been very understanding. They know that there were weeks where, yep, 13 to 15-hour days for a couple weeks to get through this particular period is going to be necessary. They've fortunately given me the grace to do that, and then um, I can honestly say that I've had less of those times than I have of times where I've had more freedom, which is a blessing.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's good. I especially with I'll probably switch into the fictional topic after this, but just one more note on kind of real life ideas and just time itself and making things too big. Just with the new job that I've had since May, one just all around great place that I'm working for now with my day in and day out. But the being in a position now, some people might love their job. Obviously, Elon hopefully loves what he does and he's putting in the hours, but I,
yeah.
nothing is too long as it is a healthy balance in your life. So right now, I have a very healthy balance in my life with time constraints and what stories, if you will, that I want to establish in my life, stories of my family, stories at work, stories with my hobbies. And it- the the best story to tell is the one that is the most well balanced and is, as a Christian, is going to bring the most glory to God and help, the place where you can do the best in every facet of your life. And even just more loosely speaking, it's or generally speaking, it's the one that's going to give you, the most balance in your life, the least stress, help provide for your family, and just be the best person you can be. Um,
Yeah. I'm not a Mormon, but there's a Mormon quote from a guy, I don't know his name, but um I thought it was a great quote. It says that there's no success that can compensate for failure in the home.
yeah,
And I truly I truly believe that, right? And again, I mean, in my opinion, I'm as motivated as they come in terms of like, yeah, when I wake up, I'm like for the most part, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to sit in front of this dang computer for however long it takes and write or talk or just do whatever needs to do to drum up the business. And yet, like for me, rest is intentional.
mhm.
Like it takes work. It's actually work to rest, but it's the kind of work that leads to a successful family and a wife and kids who respect you, but also like they yeah, I mean they respect you for taking care of them, but like it is possible to use that as an excuse to work all the time. And what does it mean to take care of them if you never see them or whatever? And so what I believe the Lord just and we can wrap it up here and then go to the fiction side.
Yep.
What I believe the Lord has really just been teaching me is about contentment. And specifically, I've been reading through the book of Ecclesiastes. So actually, we just finished up in church. We finished up in our sort of small group Sunday school. We finished up a book that walked through it, and then I naturally came across it as the next thing in my Bible reading. And so for the past week or so, I've been in the wisdom books, but specifically, looking at Ecclesiastes. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically the story of King Solomon. And the long and short of it is King Solomon was basically the Elon Musk of the ancient world. Right? I mean, you couldn't have more
Right.
than King Solomon had, and what he found was that it was worth, it was ultimately meaningless. And, at the end of the book, he says, this is the conclusion of the whole matter: fear God and keep his commandments. Just realizing that every blessing is from the Lord. And that, what that taught me was, no matter how hard I work, um, I mean, the probabilities of becoming even an Elon,
Right.
or a Solomon in this scenario are like so astronomical as to be utterly, utterly impossible. And frankly, I mean, given his home life scenarios, like, I wouldn't want it, right? And so realizing that to be at that level is not necessarily any more successful than to be at my level where I'm at right now, right? I truly believe that right now I am as materially, emotionally, physically successful as like I could die happy. I mean, in that
Yeah.
sense, right? Like I don't need anything more. And the big fundamental shift for me personally as a Christian specifically was, as soon as, like, whenever I think about what I have either accomplished or failed to accomplish, I get depressed. I think there's lack. I think, oh,
Mm,
I could use I need more clients. I need more money. I need more margin. I need more profit, or just I need more stuff, whatever it is. But when I don't think that way, and I think about how everything I have is actually a gift from God, then it becomes, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have all of this. Like,
yeah.
all of this has been given to me to manage. What in the world? And so I guess from the real life perspective, the business perspective, what I came to is just this idea that I think living in that tension is okay. Because, to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to save the world. In fact, I wrote this down. You don't have to save the world, but it's not necessarily a bad idea to try.
Hmm.
I think, I was watching an old Steve Jobs town hall the other day from when he was like, when they brought him back into Apple, when Apple bought his company Next. So this was in 1997, but it was before the current CEO stepped down and he became the new CEO. It was just so fascinating to hear him as a visionary, like, in 1997, talk about everything that was going to happen. And then here we are in 2023, and everything he said came true. And like, he laid the plan out and it happened and executed flawlessly based on his ideas. And I see things like that. And I think it's a good thing to change the world. But never to do so at the expense of your own contentment, your own, your family, making sure that in all that you do, you're pleasing the Lord, and taking care of your family. So anyway, that's where I come from on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I've been thinking about, it's nothing new, but just really trying to apply to my life too. You can look at it a different way too if you're not a Christian, but especially from a Christian perspective, where at the end of your life and you're facing your Lord and Savior, I'd rather have him tell me, hey, listen, you know, you probably could have done a little bit more at your work. Maybe you could have done a little bit more in church, but you know what? You were like a really good dad and a really good father. You
Yeah,
made sure that you were there rather than the contrary, where, you know what? You'd spent so much time with that business. You were, a good example there, a hard worker, but you kind of fell short with being there for your kids. So when it comes to tipping the scale, lean a little bit more towards the family aspect, because
that's right.
that's your number one priority.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, let's get into it. So, I guess the fun stuff starts now, rather than
Yeah,
the heavy
right,
serious things. So,
right.
oh, Steve, those were your points. I thought that was a big introduction. So we knocked through Steve's points. Okay,
Oh
perfect.
yeah, no, that was, see, look
Okay,
at me go,
I know.
right?
Look at you, man, and under sub 20, man. Oh man, look at that, Steve. I
Yep, look at
kudos
me
to
go.
you.
So we are getting to the good stuff. Now we're getting to your stuff.
Now, no, no, we did the good stuff. Now it's Alex's stuff.
No, I'm
So
at the opposite. No,
yeah.
we're just now getting into the good stuff.
Gotcha,
I'm giving you some
gotcha.
credit, man. Come on.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So, okay, so as far as, um, storytelling in general, I guess, but of course, fictional story for me, um, is there such a thing as a story that's too big? Um, Theoretically, like, no, and it kinda comes down to art being art. Um, there's actually a movie, I just hit me now, I didn't prep for this, so can't remember the name of it. I forget the director, forget how old it is, but there's a movie. I think it's something like, I'm going to be off. I don't know if it's 50 days, 100 days, or 200 days, but it's a number of days long. And like then the trailer came out for it. The trailer was like 2.5 days long, or something weird like that. I forget what the new movie is about, but obviously it never like hit theaters or anything. Um, but people watched it. Like that's too long of a movie, but it isn't, because it's still a movie. A story is a story, a movie is a movie, just like a hole is a hole and a forest is a forest. Doesn't matter how big or how small it is what it is. So theoretically, like, no, a story cannot be too big. Practically, yeah, absolutely. But a story can be extremely big and still be practically, readable and enjoyable, or, tellable if you're speaking it. So the two constraints when it comes to writing is really, it comes down to the writer, the output that the writer can do, and then the reader, the consumption that the reader can do. So one example that I have here is like the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, and Sanderson finished it up. That
Yeah.
spans 14 books, 4.4 million words, which basically comes out to around 850 pages a book across 14 books. And not only is that book not too long, in fact, I think it's sold somewhere around like 100 million copies or something like that. So
I
not
see.
only is it not too long, but I mean, people gobble it up, and people are infatuated with it and love it and reread it and reread it. And so, that there, it just, and there's other, books that are even longer than that in series, and whether it's historical or fictional, where you can set up a long story. And in fact, people seem to be drawn to those. Um, I'm digging into more, a little treat, I guess. The first newsletter that I wrote for our Substack had to deal with the fantastic world and the real world. And a lot of times the fantastic world can be a lot more interesting than the real world. And I think just the length of these stories can attest to that. Um, so as far as the macro storytelling goes, so looking at it in the big landscape, I have my own kind of personal plans where I want to do some epic storytelling and have a set of plan of how I want it to all weave together. So when it comes to that level of, the length of a book or the length of a book series, I don't really think there is too long of a length, as long as one, the author can finish it before he or she dies, assuming a normal life, that the skill of the writer is good enough to kind of do that. And then two, obviously, if the writer has enough time to write it, then readers are for sure going to have enough time to read it. And so since all of those are being the case, then no, there is no story too big, as long as those criteria are met. Now, looking at the micro level, so say a specific chapter in a book, or a specific character's background, or even a specific story that takes place in whatever book series you're reading, or historical um, narrative that you're reading, then yes, of course, a specific story can be way drawn out. So if there's a character's backstory is important to a length, and there's limits. There's sometimes where you want to dig into it, sometimes there's not. We'll go into it at some other future podcast, or I'll write about it in the blog. But yeah, there are definitely times where you can definitely write too long of a story, just because when it's uninteresting, unimportant, and other factors. So that's kind of how I look at it. No, essentially, there's no story that's too long to tell, as long as it's, interesting. It can be completed and consumed and enjoyed. So that's kind of my thoughts on the fiction side of
Mm.
things for the length of a
Ye
story.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think the engagement is, it's limited. Honestly, it's limited by interest is a way to put it,
Mm,
because,
yeah.
like, some of the, um there's a sales copywriter named Dan Kennedy who he's often made the point, because people ask him, "Well, how long should your sales letter be?"
Mm,
There's really no right answer. The answer is, it's as long as you can keep somebody interested and reading for. I mean,
yeah.
I think he said the longest one that he's aware of. And think about this. Think about like a sales letter. Okay, the purpose of this is you're reading it to be persuaded to buy, of 49 pages long, and it was a hit. Like it
Wow.
did. Like
Yeah.
it sold a bunch of stuff. And the fact is, if you can keep people engaged, which is harder than ever in this world, um, our attention is sort of divided, to say the least. So it's quite hard to keep someone's attention, but if you can, then that's gold. I wonder about from an ideological perspective, right? So I guess to hit Elon one more time, you've got, this guy thinks we can go to Mars. Not only
Yep.
that, but he's built the crap to do it. And the plan is there,
Yep.
and here we are, right? So it's almost like it's hard to imagine as a human being, a finite human being, it's hard to imagine an idea much bigger than literally conquering a new world. Um, I guess I don't know how to ask this, but I guess I'm wondering if there's an ideological limit to to the imagination. I mean, the question, can stories or ideas ever be too big? I mean, obviously stories have the ability to transport you to another world. Do you think there's some sort of ideological limits or not really?
I'm glad you asked, Steven. So I
Ah,
reading the so writing my first post that I did about the fantastic and the real world and kind of the differences and then the main similarity, linking them together, that I'm actually gonna, I think, explore that even more on the next post that I'm gonna do. And it's gonna touch on, well, kind of where's that bridge and that gap between what is just purely fantastic and only exists in our minds and what we create in our imagination versus what is actually like theoretically possible to do. So I would include, even though
interesting.
we haven't done it yet, like say taking a manned flight to Jupiter, which is for all intents and purposes, a dangerous planet to go to. No one should really want to go there.
To
But
say the least.
you're right. But theoretically, I guess it's realistic, say a million years in the future with technology and all this and that. Yes, okay, humans could theoretically land there, but is that fantastic or is that actually a real thing that might happen? And so obviously, there's going to be times where you just don't know. Like, who knows if we'll ever be able to go to Jupiter? But and so anyway, that doesn't really directly answer your question, but I think it just brings up more questions
Well,
than
you know,
answers.
what I just thought of
What did you
was,
just think of?
well, that we had a light version of this discussion back when we were talking about that movie that it's slipping my mind, with the magicians, the movie with the
Yeah,
magician,
the Prestige.
The Prestige, that
Great movie.
the whole like the stuff with Tesla and everything
Mhm,
in that movie is, I think, sort of the perfect example of that's testing. That's testing
mhm.
the limits of fiction. I think because that's right there in that boundary between like it really wants to present itself in the real world, but you can't help but think that it jumped into the world of pure fantasy a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah.
If you've seen that. Another example is well, I guess I won't name anything specific. I'll say just about anything that breaks the fourth wall, and story people, you should know what I'm talking about here, but this is The Office. Marvel does it a lot. Ally McBeal did it. Breaking the fourth wall, where basically the character comes out of character and talks to you, the audience, like breaks the wall between you and between them and the audience. Um, that is a way, I think, of testing the limits of I don't know, of reality in or of fantasy or whatever in a way, because, like, there's a certain I don't know, it loops you into the story in a different way that maybe sort of breaks that category. So, I don't know if it answers the question or has anything to do with can stories be too big, but I think it's at least worth thinking about.
And I think since we're in like the information age and even, further along than that, I guess, that bridge, if you have the fantastic world taking up 50% of the pie of what goes on in people's imagination and the real world or what could become real, the other 50%, as technology continues to grow and our knowledge continues to expand, that slice of the pie that the fantastic world has that solely belongs in the fantastic world that's slimmer and slimmer and slimmer as
Yeah,
we
that's
begin
right.
to realize new possibilities in the real world, which isn't a bad thing. It's just how it is.
Well, look at the metaverse, right? I mean, the metaverse is another great exercise of this. Like, at what point do you like are you putting glasses on to live in a world in a screen where like you could have just walked out the front door and been in that world with people in your geographic area? Like, at what point does that become like
Mhm.
what is more real? Um, so it quickly gets into some pretty big philosophical questions. I mean, if you're it's almost like a loop, right? And honestly, maybe this is something to explore even from like the religious theistic angle. But like if the best you can do, if like the best version of virtual reality is just actual reality, then why did we go virtual reality at all, right? Why didn't we just stay? And it's like, and the argument for that could be, well, imagine if you could do the same things that you could do in physical reality while separated by 3,000 miles with a person. And
Yeah.
that's something worth exploring. But it reminds me, to tie it back to business and then I'll shut up. It reminds me of the old parable of the businessman and the fisherman. And I'm not going to get all the details right, but the gist of it is, you know, the businessman is on a vacation in this small village where like basically the only thing you can do there is fish or whatever. And the businessman goes on and on about how this guy, like he starts talking to this fisherman. He's like, oh, you know what? You should start a fishery and you should hire people to, run this fishery and you should da 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 da. And you should basically you should build this empire of business. And the guy's like, well, what's the point? Like, what would I do at the end of all that? Well, he's like, well, yeah. So once you do all that, then you could just spend your days doing nothing but, just relaxing and fishing. And the guy's like, well, that's what I do right now already without having doing all that
Right.
stuff. Right. It's like I'm already living the life that I wanted. Why do I have to go do all these other things to have it? So it just reminds me of that. So I think the practical yeah, I think there are those practical, like, realistic limits that, really show up when you start asking big questions like this. And I think from my perspective, those limits are a good thing.
Little rabbit trail about the metaverse. Whether it's just the lack of, I guess, tangible, like tangible payback or being able to see like anything from it. It seems like that is kind of off to a rough start from everything that I've seen. And it doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah.
I think that at some point it'll catch on, if not through Facebook's metaverse, through some type of integration like that. But it just doesn't seem like now's the time that people are really wanting that.
Well, it's gonna catch up. It's gonna start in more practical ways. For example, there's a
Yeah.
a pretty popular YouTuber, tech YouTuber, MKBHD. He posted a video, Marquise Brownlee is his name. He posted a video, just a couple weeks ago of basically, like, he had the virtual reality glasses on. And essentially what he did is he opened up his laptop on his desk and did whatever magic he had to do, and instantaneously, there were 6 additional full-size monitors that had information, real data from the laptop, like just as though you had 6 actual monitors that he could manipulate and put wherever he wanted to and move the information around or whatever. Literally no different than if you had the physical monitors in your room by just opening up a laptop and putting on the
See,
glasses.
that's where those
That's
are
where
going
it's
to
gonna
be
start.
popular, is where it enhances your productivity or your business. Um,
Yep.
I don't know where the line or the jump is going to be to people like living like in the metaverse together.
Well,
If
gaming.
that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I think it's gonna
I
I
mean,
think it's I think it's
well,
gonna come
gaming
from
is
those 2
already.
extremes.
I
Like, I
don't.
think you're
I
gonna have
don't.
gamers and
Yeah.
business people that get into it first, and then it's gonna drift into the middle. That's kinda my prediction. Well, the reason I say that is because that's the only 2 places I see it now.
Well, I can see that. As far as when it comes to video games, yes. When it comes to productivity, yes. I don't see where. Maybe I'm sounding like a boomer here. I don't know, but I just don't see the tangibleness of like, oh, mom and dad came home from work today, and now we're like in the metaverse together. Like we're just gonna like do that. Like like as something where it's
Yeah.
like where it's a daily thing. I just don't see where that bridge comes together.
Well, and honestly, I'm not so sure, but that's the point of it, unless it was something like, "Oh, we're gonna do Thanksgiving together as a family," and, like, mom and dad live one place, brother lives someplace because the family's grown,
Mm.
daughter lives someplace else. You could literally have Thanksgiving dinner in the metaverse together. Like, I could see that sort of thing happening, and I don't know that I could have seen that happening in a world before COVID, but, like, in a post-COVID world where, like, people had to come as close to that as they possibly could have without that technology existing.
I could definitely see that happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it will be more acceptable now to people who would never have thought to entertain it before. I mean, literally, like, and this is hard to because I'm a tech guy, it's like hard for me to grasp, but like I've read enough to I know it's true. There are people who literally didn't know what Zoom was or understand it before COVID. Like, as silly as it sounds to say because it's been around for so long, COVID put Zoom legitimately on the map. Um, and so, yeah, it literally awakened people to a whole new world of working. So
A whole new world.
a whole new okay, that is where
Yeah.
it
All
stops.
right. All right. Story of the week. I'll go ahead
Yep.
and take it. Mine will be quick. Since it's so quick, I'm going to throw in a second bonus one too.
Mhm.
So I listened to Steve and I were talking before about just like Joe Rogan podcast, the Lex podcast, and just a couple people we watched on there. But this past week I listened to one that had Kanye. I guess he changed his name. I just didn't know that because I'm not tuned in. Kanye Ye West. And it was just I don't have too much to say on it except that if you're kind of interested in a kind of got into some fiery dialogue in it, and just some kind of weird views that Kanye has about stuff, but it's still when they talked about like Kanye's faith, like just very true to Jesus is a savior, like he's nothing without him. And it just kind of a realization where man, you're gonna run into people of all walks in life. And even though they might be ideologically or religiously the same of you, just a totally different person that might have crazy ideas. Or you might run into the vice versa, someone who has a totally fundamentally different worldview than you, but you get along super well and you have the same interests and are pretty well grounded. And so, yeah, I don't have too much more to say about it. Just it's a really interesting episode. If you're not familiar with the podcast, it's the Lex Friedman podcast. But if you are, it was a really fun episode to check out. Second one, just something fun. I thought I was going to win the $2 billion lottery. I bought a few tickets and it just didn't happen.
Mhm.
I'm kind of shocked. I was expecting to win, but it just didn't
Did you
happen.
wait, did you name it and claim it? See, if you didn't
Claim.
write it down and say, "Thank you, Lord, for doing it," first, you
Yes,
didn't have a chance.
I didn't. I should have. I prayed really hard though. Does that count?
It does not count, actually.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, no,
But
no, you have to,
name it and claim it.
exercise your faith, not just pray as if you believe it, you see?
Okay. I
Mhm.
messed up there. I'll try next lottery.
Try it next time.
But I am it looks like for all intents and purposes, there's just one winner that won it all, $2 billion.
Wow. You know what's really sad? There's a, like, super high percentage chance that that person's life is, like, now ruined, right? Like
Yep.
like like, how
Yep.
many stories do you hear of people who win the lottery and their lives are ruined because they didn't know how to handle it at all, like, in the first place, you know?
Yeah, they
Anyway,
just don't know how to handle it. There's a lot of
it's
sad
crazy.
stories for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's one of those it's funny. This is the only second time I've ever bought a lottery ticket in my life. First time, Brooke and I brought, like, when we first got married, like, a $1 thing just for the heck of it. And then
Yep.
this time, I was like, $2 billion, I'll give myself a shot." And so, I actually didn't even purposely do it. I was in the
Right.
gas station getting something for Brooke, and someone ordered it ahead of me, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's, like it's at $2 billion now," and I got it. And it's one of those things where I'm looking at it, and I said, "I know I'm not gonna win it, but someone's gonna win it." Like,
Exactly.
the people that won it
Yeah.
said the same thing as me, like, "We're obviously not gonna win it," but they won it,
Right.
and so, it's just one of those it was a fun thing to get
Yeah.
excited for no reason.
Yep. No, I think that's yeah, that's cool. So speaking of faith, my
Yeah.
story of the week is actually sort of faith related as well. Um, and to be honest, I didn't plan to go this direction, but maybe we should. Since this is our last podcast for the year,
Yeah.
Christmas coming up or whatever. Obviously, at this point, no secrets here. Like me and Alex are both very committed Christians, and maybe you're not. Like maybe you're listening to this now or in the future or whatever, and you're like, yeah, I don't really buy it. Like Alex and Steve have some interesting stuff to say about business and fiction and story, but like they can keep their religious stuff to themselves. Or maybe you've just doubted. Like maybe you are a religious person and you've doubted in the past. So, um, uh, check out a website called talkaboutdoubts.com. This is my story of the week. A guy named Jonathan McClatchy started it. He's a colleague of mine. And he a lot of people that I know are on there. And essentially what it is, it's this website where Christians who are or just really anybody who's experiencing doubt as it relates to their faith can book a Zoom call. It's totally free. Go in there and book a Zoom call with a super duper smart person who is a subject matter expert in their field. And for example, if you have doubts about, like, again, if you're a person who thinks whatever, evolution disproves Christianity or whatever, you can legit go talk to a person who has a PhD in evolutionary biology and is a Christian, and they will have that conversation with you. Um, if you're somebody who has doubts about the problem of evil, I mean, you can literally go on there and talk to a philosopher who has a PhD in their discipline, is well respected, who has thought through that problem and who is a Christian. And it's a fantastic ministry. It's an absolutely fantastic ministry. There's no pressure around it. For people who end up going through it, I think they even have like a continuation sort of program thing that you get looped into where they're doing like regular webinars and training things that are really specifically meant to address certain things. So look, the reality is that, me and Alex both very, feel very strongly about the fact that the Christian worldview is I mean, Christianity is just another way of saying the way the world really is, right? So it's not just like, oh, you kind of like your religious buffet, like you choose this God, you choose that God, or whatever. We genuinely believe that there is a creator God. We believe that he manifested himself, not manifested himself, but we believe he took on human flesh in the form of Jesus of Nazareth. We think there's really great historical evidence that Jesus of Nazareth was not only crucified on the cross, died and rose again the third day, just like the Bible describes, and we think there's good historical evidence for that. And you will find that there are a lot of other smart people who really believe that as well. And so a ministry like talkaboutdoubts.com is a great place to go. It's literally, especially as we're coming up on Christmas time, it's the most important decision that you or anyone could ever make. And so at the very least, even if you don't believe it or whatever, right now, it's very serious, like what you do with Jesus. There's a reason why like all religions sort of want to piggyback on Jesus in some way. Like even like, Muslims and Mormons and everybody wants something to do with Jesus because of who he is. And there's something special about him. And I think what you do with Jesus, like you can't be indifferent. If the Bible is true, then there's no such thing as a person who will be ultimately indifferent about Jesus. You will take a position on him one way or the other. And it's good to be informed if you take the position to either trust Jesus with your life or not to. And a ministry like Talk About Doubts could be extremely, like, I know these guys, if you trust me at all, you can take my word for it. It would be a very
I can
low
trust
pressure.
you as far as I could throw you, Steve.
Well, you couldn't throw me very far, unfortunately. So, but these guys are very, it's not going to be like these are really down to earth dudes. In fact, I disagree with them. In fact, on a lot of issues, they're probably far less. I'm not. I don't think I wouldn't consider myself like fundamentalist because I think it's a loaded term. But if I am fundamentalist, these guys are definitely not. Like most of the guys you're going to talk to on there are solid Christians, but I would even probably have my disagreements with them on a lot of things, and yet. They are believers. They believe the central claim that Jesus Christ rose from the dead and is the savior of the world and the creator of the world. If you think it sounds crazy, then talkaboutdoubts.com. Go talk to some super smart people who happen to believe that. And based on the testimony of some that I know who have gone through it, I think you will be pleasantly surprised by the conversations.
Yeah, while you were talking, I just looked that up a little bit, and it's really interesting. It's a cool, simple idea. They have a nice setup, and that's really interesting. I didn't know that was out there.
Yeah, from the just organizational perspective, of course, I saw it and I was like, why didn't I think of that? It's
Right,
genius,
man. And you and I could have been the
genius.
only people on there, see, just answering people's
Right?
questions all day.
I
But
mean, that would have been so fun.
what's funny, I went down a little mini rabbit hole. Though. I was looking at the bottom. They have a list of people who were like involved in it, whatever. Just a
Yeah,
list, and I
that's
found
right.
one who has his PhD in what does he have in astronomy from the University of Cambridge. And now I'm like, I saved his website, and he has a podcast, so I'm gonna start listening to him because it's space
Who?
stuff.
Luke
Luke
Barnes?
Barnes, yeah,
Luke Barnes, yeah,
yeah,
Luke Barnes is a great,
yeah. So
yeah,
that'll be
that's
good.
right. Yep, great
Anyway,
guy.
cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, very cool. At the very least, I like the, JP Moreland, who is a philosopher of mind. He once made a statement that, it was during a speaking event. He once made the statement that a lot of people falsely have the wrong idea that all the smart guys are not Christians, right? That basically atheists and
Mhm.
agnostics have all the smart guys, and that's just patently not true. And so,
And I'll tell you, that was something that, I just thought was I just thought that that was a thing for so many years
yeah,
that,
me
like,
too,
smart
me
and
too.
until honestly, until you just get invested, whether it's through
That's right.
reading books or honestly, the most important thing is getting involved in a in a church that actually, like, promotes teaching and, sound thought and everything like that. Because I and just being introduced to those kind of things, because there are a lot of smart people out there
Hmm.
that are Christians. It doesn't surprise me, but it just yeah. A lot of times
Yep.
you think the other way, but, definitely not true.
Yeah, and William Lane Craig, a pretty well-known Christian, philosopher, he's made the statement that in recent years he's observed that physicists, of all people, are more open than ever to the reality of theism, to the reality
Mm,
of there being the existence of God, because they realize the limits of the physical world so well, because it's their discipline. They realize the limits of the world coming into existence out of nothing, right? They realize, they see the awe and the grandeur of the way creation functions, and they're open to the idea that it didn't just happen this way because it looks so well designed.
yeah.
So, anyway, it's a Christianity is the worldview for the smart guys. That's the way that I would put it. So,
Well said.
yep.
Any advice or words of wisdom to wrap up this, first season of the podcast, Steve?
Um, well, I think just in general, I would say that stories are all around us. And that's kind of been, this year has sort of been an exploration of that. I hope, if nothing else, and maybe you're stumbling across things and you listen to this, and this is the first episode of us you've ever listened to, and you're like, what are these crazy dudes talking about? But go back to the beginning and check out the
Yeah.
podcast, and um I think what you'll end up finding is the stories are just all around, everywhere you look, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Everywhere.
yeah, everywhere you look, there's a story that's either being told or waiting to be told. And I think, I'll go back to the thing that we said on the very first episode. I think that the world is full of stories because the world is based on a true story, and I believe that's the true story that we do see in Christianity. And I just believe that, and so I'm excited to explore even more about the connection between the world of imagination, the world of um, business and marketing, and the way that people think, and the world of basically philosophy of religion. Like, diving into all of those things is kind of what we do here, and we're gonna, I think, take that even to the next level with the introduction of the Substack and the way that the podcast goes into next year. So I'm like super super stoked about it.
Yeah, more or less the same. I think, one thing that's just been really great this past year is, just listening to Steve about just the marketing and business side of things. And even though I had a general knowledge of everything like that, just the realization of um, um, how profound just those kind of teachings are to get yourself to really realize how to promote yourself, whether it's trying to do something like this, like on YouTube and getting a name for yourself so you can, publish a book or whatever. But whether it's at your work or in your church or anywhere, just using those kind of fundamental principles to put yourself out there. And then in the grander scheme of things with story, um I think we've said it before, but I mean, just take an interest in people and take an interest in yourself, and um self-examine yourself. And what story do you tell? What story do you
Mm.
see when you look at your life, and what story do other people see? And ask people what story they see when they look at you. And yeah, more or less the same about just looking at the next year. I think we got a lot done this year just getting started. Next year I just see a huge leap in what we're going to be outputting, and I think it's only going
Yeah.
to go up from there, so I'm super excited.
Well, and to close out here, I mean, I'd be remiss not to mention that I could say the very same thing. I've learned a lot from you, not only about how to think about stories, but practically speaking, I've started reading and even a little bit writing, but mostly reading
Mhm.
some fiction of my own. I mean, I thanks to the talks and the stuff this year, I mean, I've made it through one Harry Potter book and two Lord of the Rings books, and the whole Jurassic Park,
Mm,
and
yeah.
about 20% of the way through the Terminal List, all fiction works. And before this year, um, I don't I mean, other than what I was required to read in high school, which I hated every second of, I don't know that I've ever read a fiction book. So that's
Wow,
from no fiction books to 3, no,
that's
4,
funny.
um, in 1 year, just sort of, a lot thanks to you. So it's tangibly shown up and helped
Mhm.
me in my life. And if nobody else got anything out of this year's podcast, I certainly got that. So I'm glad that we
At
can
least
both
there's 2
come
of us.
together. At least there's 2 of us. All right.
All right,
Very good.
Steve.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, my boy Al. Thank you, our boys and gals, listeners. Like, share the podcast again, coming back for season 2, the beginning of next year. Check out storyworld.substack.com to follow along with a couple things that we're going to be posting in between now and the end of the year.
Yep.
And thanks for coming along with us.
See ya. Enjoy the holidays and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.